Hey guys, it's Matt Hanham here and welcome to the Amplify Your Business podcast. Matt Hanham here with another episode of Amplify Your Business podcast. I would tell you which episode number it is if I knew, but I don't. So today we're here with Conrad Francis, and rather than me do the intro, perhaps I'll let you say a little bit about who you are, Conrad, and what do you do. Pumped to have you here.
Yeah, cheers, mate. It's been we talked about it for a bit. Conrad Francis. I own and run a company called Inspired Money, which is a financial services business, generally targeting mums and dads that pretty much have got some sort of idea of what they want, and we can help them shape that.
So if they're single, you're not interested?
We do have a lot of single people. Well, millennials don't get into relationships too early in life these days, mate. So the younger people are single, and then you've obviously got the divorcees that go through the other end. So I guess you do have a few.
Sorry, I'm cutting you off the pitch.
I know. Anyway, so that's a financial services business. I've been in banking and financial services since 1992. So I might not look that old. I get told. I feel probably twice as old. But it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. All right. So that's one part of your life, I guess. There's probably a few others, but one of the other key areas is basketball. So you're a coach for a Western Australian SBL team.
State basketball league team. Been involved with SBL program since 2009. Currently with the Pera Lakes Hawks. Yep. Although at this stage I'm still not signed. But that's looking like being the case. Okay, awesome. All right.
So I guess we'll just run through a couple of little questions. Mainly start on your business, where you're at, and I've got just a few little random ones down the way. So, look, when you started, how long has Inspired Money been around?
Inspired Money, 2011. February 2011 we started. Yep. We did evolve out of another business. So Shane and myself have been in business for about 11 years now. Okay. Since 2011 as Inspired Money. Yeah.
All right. So, obviously in banking for a long time before that as well. So how did you start?
As a young bloke, I guess I started to understand that money was something that was what underpinned success with a lot of people. And maybe I framed it the wrong way as a youngster. I had a career goal to become a stockbroker, and it was always aligned to creating wealth. So going into banking when I dropped out of university seemed to be the easiest thing to do because probably the base level entry to somewhere. And I started in probably the second lowest job in a bank, just checking the checks and making the signatures were right. Then over the period of time, I got up to the management, and then took my experience out into private practice.
It's fascinating that, in just to cut in like the stockbroker thing. I'm thinking that era you got in at 92 was the original sort of Wall Street.
Yeah, it's probably
it's probably a few years before that. I just guess that there would be very common in the aspiration at the time for young people because of what they've been shown on the media and some of these movies that a stockbroker is the way to go.
I guess for me it was more so the case that two of my uncles actually started talking to me about the stock markets when I was 15 years of age anyway. So I think it was probably concurrently around the 87 stock crash and then just post that, the 80s were pretty loaded when it comes to antics, put it lightly. I wasn't really aware of all that stuff, but upon reflection it was pretty highlighted. But my attraction to the stock market was because of my two uncles, and primarily because of it was a wealth play for me. We're a migrant family of this country. We came here, or Dad came here with $20 in his pocket, and to allow us to move forward, it was a chance to create wealth. And that was the path that I thought was possibly the easiest one for me to do it within.
I guess where I was going with that is I was connecting a dot between how everyone wants to be an entrepreneur sort of right now. And I feel like that you go through those different phases of, or even decades where this is sort of what it, this type of activity or this type of vocation is where you need to be to sort of create wealth. And I feel like we've moved into this phase where everyone needs a start-up and everyone's an entrepreneur. And whereas back in the day, being a banker or being a stockbroker was sort of the path that was seen as
it's probably a fashionable tag, and it's probably how it's been marketed, to be the truth. You take me back 10, 15 years when I was in the bank, probably 15 years in the bank, and you're seeing lending applications coming through. And the odd application coming through as entrepreneur, you think, well, this guy's a deadbeat. And the financial situation pretty much showed the same thing. And I don't think that's probably that dissimilar right now, to tell you the truth. Except there's a lot more glossier magazines, and people seem to think that's a flashy tag to put on a business card.
Yeah, so absolutely. Yeah, cool. So take me back to that moment. I mean, you're checking checks.
Yep.
Or you're not checking checks by that point, but you've moved up. You're in banking. I guess some form of relationship management.
Here's one thing.
Okay.
On the point of checking checks, the most famous check I was asked to find was through the WA Inc. days. I was asked to find a check signed by Alan Bond for $1 million. Now that was pretty funny, right? I had to go into the storerooms.
Probably a lot of them.
But I've never seen something like that, right? So as a junior kid here, you're looking to find a personal check signed for $1 million, which was critical to the case.
Another 20 years ago as well, right? So back the $1 million is an even more.
So it wasn't just checking checks, right? It was pretty cool checks.
Yeah, no. So I wasn't going there. I mean, you roll through the bank. You get. I was actually leading into a story, but you roll through the bank. You get to a level. I assume some form of relationship management over like larger clients. You're sitting at your desk one day. At what point do you go, you know what? It's time for me to do this for myself.
I guess my motives I was going through some life-changing stuff at that stage, and I think my decision to leave weren't probably motivated by probably the best intentions. I just wanted to run and hide, to tell you the truth. The bank was expecting a lot out of me, and I loved the work, but then I was being pulled from pillar to post, and I didn't feel like I was getting any value from anything I was doing. So it was probably more a selfish play than it was anything else.
Yeah.
And I mean, nonetheless, everything happens purposefully, right? So upon reflection, I can look and see, well, it was still a great opportunity and time to get out. I probably didn't go into the next venture with the best intent, which meant it didn't really curate itself out the right way over the years I was there. So
I find that very interesting because even jumping into the next venture, I've left employment as well a long time ago, and I don't think you might have the right intent, but you actually don't even have the right sort of approach to work. You actually have to, I think, learn how to go from doing what you have to do to doing as much as you can of what you want to do to grow a business. And at some point, I think you have to. There's a D-Day, but then there's a build-up of that where you start to sort of bring through cultivating a different approach to your work and life.
It is. You're exactly right. I mean, I left the bank and my priority was to put a safety net in place. Yeah. So whilst I was going into business with a couple of other accountants, I wanted my salary protected. Now, I mean, so this is what I'm saying to you. I mean, it's not like I was going out and taking a risk. I had my salary protected, which, upon reflection, isn't really leaving the bank. It's leaving an institution and creating a rod for your own back somewhere else.
It's good if you could do it.
Well, yeah, and I did, and
I
did, and rightly or wrongly, I guess it didn't allow me to light my fire well enough, fast enough. Yeah. And so and because I was having some personal issues at the time, I still allowed them to transition into that venture, and so therefore everything just took time, and it probably wasn't the smartest thing I could have done. Yeah. But upon reflection, I still was writing a fair bit of business. The other 3/4 of the quartet were probably still waiting for me to cover them, and I wasn't at that point in time. Yeah. Take me where I am now and put me back in the situation, very, very different. Yeah. But I wasn't there then.
Because you just can't have the skills, right? I mean,
you can't.
It's easy.
You can think as much as you want. Yeah. You can think you have.
You can read. You can read all the 10x books under the sun, but until you actually do something, right? Yeah. So how did you then first make? So obviously you'd covered yourself. Yep. However, we won't go into depth. But how did you then first start making revenue?
Making revenue happened. I guess I knew what I needed to earn to cover me. What I didn't understand was how to cover the business. Okay. So learning about business started very early, and I was thrust upon that. Now, after 18 months, we broke the business up. Yeah. I took my clients and the revenue I was bringing, and it was easiest to look after me by myself for a period of time. That's a lonely game. So I ended up then exiting the financial planning business and financial planning industry, and took some time out to allow myself and my personal matters to try and settle down.
Well, even that, I mean, starting a business of people that haven't been in business before with 4 of you.
No, the other 3 were an established accounting practice.
Okay, you jumped on top. Yeah. Okay, so I was thinking, that the politics around starting and getting a business moving in early days is tough anyway. I think if you had 4 minds, which you obviously still had, then probably a group of 3 who had some idea on how they wanted you to behave.
Everybody wants something, right? Everybody wants something, and they're not really clear with their communication. And I've been very, very open with how I think communication happens in this world at the moment. It doesn't. I don't care what everyone says. I think communication's going like this all the time. Everyone's talking at the other person and not you're not talking to them, and then they're not listening to you and they're not hearing you. And so what was going on was, they were communicating what they wanted. I was communicating what I wanted. No one was getting what they really needed because they weren't seeing it that way. Yeah. So, I put my hand up and said, okay, enough's enough. Walk away. And then the learning really starts, right? The learning couldn't happen.
The safety net fell away.
Yeah, the safety net fell away. But you couldn't really, when you're in a situation, you really don't learn. You just don't, okay? You're just trying to learn, but you're just too busy doing everything else. Give yourself some space, and the lessons start to become real. And you think, oh shit, maybe I should have done this, or maybe I could have done that. Maybe I've communicated that the wrong way. And all that starts to accumulate right in front of you pretty quickly. And then you move on.
Yeah. Okay. So you're then by yourself.
Yep.
You're running your business. How do you market your business?
Back in those days, there was no social media. Yeah. Barely a mobile phone was in my hand.
You didn't have one of those big briefcases with the...
No, I never had one of the big ones. I didn't have... Well, wasn't there after. I mean, I had one that was probably the size of most telephone handsets these days. Or slightly bigger.
Aerial.
Yeah, and they were fine. I mean, it allowed you to operate from wherever. I was operating at a mum and dad's place in the office there, and dad was babysitting my daughter at the time, so it worked out well for me. Yeah. But how did I get business? It was just word of mouth. It really was. It was almost, and I still do it that way, but really just going out and connecting with professionals that you wanted to work with.
Yeah. So how's it changed now?
How's it changed now? Well, largely it hasn't. It just, I think what social media's allowed you to do and technology's allowed you to do is actually probably get in contact with more people. But the engagement piece hasn't changed. You still have to connect with people now, whether it be digitally, and you can still connect with them digitally if they're very clear with their conversational piece with you. But more important, I think, at the moment, it's still the face-to-face stuff that gets you the relationship. You can maintain the relationship digitally. I think that's where we're at with society at the moment. Yeah. En masse. I mean, you might get the odd pockets that will purely engage digitally, but en masse, it's still the face-to-face, and then you can manage it on a digital platform.
I completely agree. And one thing I've actually witnessed of you is at a basketball game or in other locations, just noticing how much, or how frequently and how many people you're just communicating with, just on a little touch basis. I've sat at a stadium nearby and watched you talking to some guys over there and some guys over there, and in person with others, and I've just witnessed that constant communication. And that's, I think, where people let themselves down. They think they can just slap something up there, like you said, the communication piece, just throwing something out there. Yeah, but that's not a conversation. That's not listening. That's not a genuine one-on-one interaction. No. What the digital stuff does is allow us to quickly ping someone in London, and they can write straight back. We couldn't do that before. But it's still that personal.
But that's everything, right? It's how you use the tool. It's not the tool itself. Yeah. We can talk about social media being, a wart on society at the moment, and some people wouldn't like you to believe that, but we've seen businesses come from scratch to multi-million-dollar businesses, the fastest in history because of it. So it's how you use the tool.
Yeah, for sure. On that note, on how you use the tool, we might switch off the Facebook Live.
Cool.
We're just testing, running the first bit of the podcast on Facebook Live, and we'll get the full episode out shortly. So catch you later for whoever's there.
See you later.
See you soon. All right. So what's then the vision for your business, and where do you see it changing, let's say, in the next 3 to 5 years? And you're established.
Yep.
You do what you do, but there's obviously a lot of disruption, especially around the marketplace in all markets, but certainly yours too. What's the vision, and where do you see it going in the next sort of half decade?
Well, the vision of the business, which has been for a while now, it's a case of wanting us to connect with, the vision is to deliver financial services and keep them affordable and accessible to all Australians. That's the vision. Yeah. Now, that doesn't mean Inspired Money has to deliver that. It just means what we do is enabling that. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. In the sense that, even the conversations I have with other businesses and other bigger businesses is challenging them to enact our vision. Because if a larger corporate actually gets it and they jump on board, we can sit back and the greater part of Australia.
Huge change, right?
Yeah, exactly right. And if a greater population is more aware of the value of advice, then a small business like myself in the boondocks of WA will no doubt benefit from that. Yep. The numbers at the moment, I think less than 20% of Australians seek advice from financial advisors, yet most of us still retire underfunded. Most of us are underinsured. and there's a lot of us that still believe that our home is our asset. And technically that's not the truth. So,
but that's a great model if you're basically your entire country's wealth sits on the four banks, right? And you don't,
Well, I mean if you read the press at the moment, mate, it's a bit scary.
That's the propaganda, right? I mean, it really has been for 30, 40, 50 years. It's like you need to own that home, and this is how it needs to work, and this is your key asset and driver. I mean, that you'll contradict that, and what you're saying, but that has been what's been pushed to the market for a long time. Only 20% are seeking more advice.
I don't doubt that owning a home is important, but it's the type of home and when you own it and how you own it.
Yeah.
Too many people go into debt too early and then spend 20, 30 years of your life paying it back and then scrambling to retire. I'm thinking, get your financial independence up, then buy the assets, buy the personal assets.
Yeah.
But
the one that kicks me is the wedding. The 50.
I'm single, mate, so I'm
no,
okay.
but the average 50. I think it's about 50, and I haven't got the source, but it's the average Australian wedding's about 50K now, and then they walk out, they're still renting, they've got no money, and they can't start to do anything. And I'm like, does it need to be that much money to have a brilliant day? But anyway, that's because it's the timing of that event, right?
Yep.
That event is coming just as they're a couple's trying to kick off.
Yeah. I agree with
their
you.
life together, and at that time, and they literally load themselves up, credit cards, all the parents, every piece of help gets spent on that day. And
what we are seeing though, Matt, at the moment, the trend is at the moment, particularly with the millennials.
Yeah.
Nil are really looking at personal home ownership. They might acquire investment properties.
Yeah.
They're not getting married early. They're getting married later.
Yeah.
So I think financial independence is actually, or at least financial awareness, is sitting within that millennial.
Yeah.
They've seen the generations above them do it really hard. And for some reason why I became my own boss, I didn't want to work for another person like my mum and dad did. And I didn't feel that they were valued well enough, whether it be monetarily or anything else.
Yeah.
Now they will say my mum and dad made a great living out of what they did.
Yeah.
And they're very loyal people, but I knew there had to be another way. And working for someone wasn't going to do it for me. So I think the millennials are challenging that even further. And we might sit here and think, these guys are frigging this and they're doing that, and they'll have 15 careers before they start working, or 20 careers before they start working, what the numbers are saying. But they are challenging the norm at the moment.
That's just our discomfort with change.
Yeah.
And that's what that really is. Like the 20-year, the 30-year working cycle, now it's got a lot shorter. And I've touched on it as I'm writing some blogs and doing a few things very shortly around there's a zennial term which has come out recently, which is the 78 to 83, I think, which is the gap between sort of the Gen Xers and the millennials. And I for years said I've felt like a conduit in that space between the older generation that have a lot of the wealth and run a lot of the businesses, etc., and then the younger crew, because I run a digital agency, but I can't necessarily jump up and do all the posting and all that type of activity, but I do sit in this middle ground where I was raised analog.
Yep.
My pretty much entire career has been digital, which I find is a really interesting space, but there's nothing wrong with them. They've just come out of a different environment that was around when they were kids. So and I think fundamentally there's a lot of improvements in the thought processing, but there's just always differences, right?
But I also think that there's a lot. We're sitting on the biggest wealth transfer in the history of mankind at the moment, right? The wealth passing from the baby boomers down into the X gens, Y gens, and millennials, it's going to be monumental. And I think a lot of it is, it's going to be interesting to see how it gets spent. But most baby boomers have got two houses. So there's an extra house floating around. Now, what's that going to do to property prices when a lot of this stuff starts hitting the markets and people don't own property? It's going to be very interesting. So there's a lot of little circuit breakers built into our economy.
There's some massive circuit breakers coming. I'm so excited. I'm excited to see it, although I realise there's going to be a lot of destruction, but I'm really looking forward to watching how retail is reshaped, how that reshapes all of our property, how all this driverless and even just shared, transportation is going to change the concrete parking jungles that we've got everywhere that sit vacant for so long. There's just such an waste of space. We haven't been good at share. All we've wanted to do was have our own infrastructure and completely separate and own everything that we want. But the best way and the most cost-effective way is to be able to share certain things, and that's what the technology is allowing, which is really cool, I think. So, just to jump back there. But all right, cool. So, what are maybe some of the bigger challenges you faced in your business?
Challenged. I mean, the biggest challenge for me is people. I mean, I love people, but it is people. It's making sure they're motivated, making sure that when I say people, it's staff.
Yeah.
Making sure they're motivated and making sure that you're attending to their needs, making sure you're delivering to them their outcomes, all as part and parcel of delivering a client outcome that keeps everything going.
Yep.
And what I've realised these days, more so than probably when I started or probably you started in the workplace, you'd walk in the door and it's yes sir, no sir, 3 bags full sir. It's not like that.
It's a very different game now.
It's probably very opposite to that.
Yeah.
And everybody wants to do what you're doing, and everybody wants what you have, without having to necessarily jump through the hoops of fire to get there and the traps and pitfalls to get there. Connecting with that generation has been something I've probably worked a lot on. It's probably something that basketball's also helped me with, to tell you the truth, because it's much a people management game as what running an office is.
Yep.
I still say that being a basketball coach and a successful basketball coach has helped me become a better business person, and vice versa. All hierarchical, all KPIs, all structures and communication lines, and
I'd argue it's a great space to be able to test different styles as well, because you're only looking at maybe losing a few buckets or losing a quarter or a game to try a different approach, say with an individual, that you could then take to business, which then obviously is not losing that few 100,000 or whatever that looks like so I assume that insight and that extra capability and sort of experience.
It's been a good byproduct. It wasn't something I thought about literally going into it. I mean, I knew there were some synergies, but I didn't realise how much. And I've spent some time over in Illawarra recently, and I caught up with Rob Beveridge, and Bevo, one of the best coaches in Australia. Even he has mentors outside of basketball, and they're lawyers and they're business people, and him and I talk.
That makes sense, right? But I think a lot of people wouldn't necessarily think to do that.
No.
Especially if you're at his level.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, okay. So do you think some of your biggest challenges you've had are people?
Yeah, and I think people will continue to be our biggest challenge, because I think the more disconnected we become as a society, the more connection we seek, but quality connection. We're not just seeking any connection. So anyone that you have on board on your staff, you really want to be taking them on a journey that's allowing them to get to where they want to get to next, for them to take on their next journey. I think this ideology of us having a 10-year, 20-year colleague or staff member is flushed.
Yeah, it's so different now, isn't it? I mean, it was one thing if you were going to stand on a conveyor belt for 20 years or metaphorically something similar. But in the way we approach things now, where we really are so much more creative and strategy driven for humans, and if you're not, then you can find probably a better way, a better approach, some sort of better vocation. But it's so hard. You've already got your partner that you're at least trying to spend as much time with as possible. Then how are you going to keep 10, 5, 20, 300 people in the same values and in the same vision for that kind of time? Because everyone has different cycles.
You've got to identify, and what I've learned, and I wouldn't say I'm an expert at, but I'm getting better at, is identifying the big ticket items, not necessarily everything. So what do you need to do on a regular basis?
So what are the big ticket items?
Well, the individual. It depends on the individual. Yeah, it's so personal. But and this is what I'm saying, to individually manage everybody, which is what everyone's looking for.
Yeah.
You can only really stroke their egos in one or two different ways on an ongoing basis.
Yep.
You can't do everything for everybody.
Yep.
So you just spend time talking to them. I meet up with my staff once a month at a minimum on a one-on-one basis, or that's a small office, so we get to chat, but one-on-one time once a month. But most of them have come. Well, some of the younger ones have come through basketball teams I've coached, so I've learnt about them outside of the game, outside of the workplace, and then applying them inside the workplace has been actually quite good.
Yeah.
It's been one of my better success stories, is bringing the guys from outside basketball and inside the business, and teaching them how to start and build a career the same way they started in building their basketball careers. So
okay, that's probably a very good segue into my next question. So where did basketball life start then? I mean, obviously some form of playing history before coaching.
Yep. Well, I mean, I was one of the young blokes that had some raw ability. I only really started playing when I was 13 years of age. My brother taught me how to play, and we used to muck around on my sister's netball ring.
So 13.
Yeah.
So you're not super early.
No, not super early. And I mean, and I didn't play any real structured basketball till probably 15.
Really?
At which point in time, I made a state squad, and then the year after was invited to try out with the Institute of Sport, which was the Junior Wildcats program at the time.
Yep.
Blew my knee out early that year, which
is what is when you're
17, yeah,
Okay.
17, blew my knee out, did my ACL in February on my birthday, and the rest is pretty much history from that point in time. Back in those days, ACL injuries were almost as career-threatening as what they are these days, but probably even more so. I was lucky enough to get back, and then 6 weeks after getting back, I broke my left ankle, so that really saw me out of basketball for 2 years. And whilst I'd played some domestic level and got to playing some junior Wildcats level and all that type of stuff, I used to still find myself getting back down to Wildcats practice because I knew the people, but my time had gone. My athleticism that I had really, really tapered off, and I was looking at earning not a lot of money playing basketball versus do I put my head back in the books and start to actually take my desire to grow and be the best and all that stuff and apply it to business, and that's what I pretty much did.
Okay. So you sort of made that decision fairly early.
I had to. I really had to. I mean, I couldn't. I probably resented the sport at that point in time, to tell you the truth. I mean, I really took a couple of steps back from high-level basketball for a period of time. I played some normal competitions around the place, but I really didn't want a part of any senior program. I was really resentful for things, probably from around my early 20s. And it really wasn't until my mid-30s that someone got me back to the senior level basketball games again.
So how did that happen? How do you go from sort of resenting it, spending the best part of a decade almost away from the sport in a lot of ways? How do you then, where do you find yourself back in coaching? Like, is this back into juniors, or is this back into,
Well, it was a mate of mine who I'd played a lot of my junior basketball with got me into coaching juniors again. I mean, and strangely enough, my first junior group I got sacked from because I was too hard on them. I got sacked from coaching juniors.
Too hard on the juniors.
But it was fun though. I mean, I loved it. They did call me back the season later and said, "Okay, Conrad, we've got the parents on board, we've got the kids on board, we're ready for you now." We wanted to win 3 or 4 championships back with my junior basketball club, which was a really fun thing to do. Yeah. And when I stopped coaching,
which club is this?
They're called the East Perth Eagles. Yeah. No, East Perth Eagles is the Wobble, but these were the East Perth, the Morley Rockets, which is the feeder club.
Okay.
I played with East Perth as well as the Morley Rockets, which were the Morley Police and Youth Citizens Group back in the early days. So it's good to go back and give back somewhat. Nice to win some championships with them. They gave me my number 10 singlet and said, there you go, thanks very much, because I made a decision at that point to get back involved at SBL level. So I missed all of Wobble coaching and went straight from juniors to SBL because I was dating a girl at the time who...
because I was dating a girl at the time.
I was playing senior level basketball, and one of my old mates was coaching. And he goes, "Well, you're too good to sit in the stands. Come and join me on the bench." So that's how that happened.
Perfect.
So
just go and work with the under 10s and just walk into the SBL and go, yeah, sure, just throw me on the bench, no problem.
Exactly right. Well, that's exactly how it happened, mate.
That's great. So then, obviously you've then stuck with it. You've enjoyed it and continued on.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, my first year in, we played in the grand final. We lost the grand final with the Perry Lakes ladies, and I won a grand final in the D League for my first season. So. And I've probably had a lot of success at D League level since 2009.
Yep.
And we've also, I've now coached men and picked up a men's championship in the SBL with Coburn a couple of years back. So I've done a lot in basketball that I haven't been able to do as a player, as a coach.
That was actually my next question: is how did you find standing on the other side of the line, so to speak, with that white line fever, one way of putting it, but how did you? How did you find that adjustment? Did it sort of speak to you and you found you really enjoyed then helping to cultivate players, or was it a bit of was there any resentment in there early? And
no, I don't. The resentment's gone. The resentment's been flushed. The frustration kicks in when these kids want minutes, and we've just had that conversation in the office just then about chasing minutes as opposed to appreciating your time. Yeah. And it's a constant conversation, and it's one which I've never really understood with these younger kids at the moment. Like I posed the question to a couple of youngsters a few years back: Would you chase minutes at another club versus a championship with the club you're at, and no minutes? And back in my day, I mean, I'm 45, so a few years back, there were some pretty powerhouse clubs, and you were just privileged to swap sweat on the training court. You know, and if you didn't feel that way, then you wouldn't be there. But I mean, our training sessions were, you'd sell tickets to them. They were that good. So, you know, I feel these kids at the moment are not actually, they're missing the value. And I think I think it really is directly related to this whole instant gratification versus delayed gratification scenario. If you're patient enough and you don't look for the instant stuff, the rewards are so much bigger and better, and they're not really that far away.
See, I find that very interesting, and it's a good angle there too, because someone like a Kobe Bryant, or let's even say a Phil Jackson, you know, I know you're a big fan of his book, 11 Rings. You know, that's not what they're preaching. That you can jump out there and it all happens so fast. So where, you know, they're obviously are putting in some work at some level and have done for a period of time to get there. Why are they? No, sorry. The youngsters you're dealing with, you know, put in some work for some time. You know, at least a few years. They're trained. They probably, you know, diet. They're probably doing other things. A lot of things that are helping them. But why are they then falling short? You know, when the greats that they really should be and would be aspiring to are really telling them something very different.
Mate, it's I believe the human body exists. Well, the human exists in 4 states: physical, mental, spiritual, and emotional. And most of us, as we're growing up, are capable of looking after 1 or 2 of those states. Yeah. But what I've found, you know, particularly with basketball and possibly with work as well, you'll get to a point where it is mental. Yeah. And you've got the demons. You've got to weed your own garden. And at times we don't have the tools, or we're not brave enough to have the conversations. But it's the mental game that separates the Kobe Bryants to the next person. And if you go from Kobe Bryant to a step down, and you're talking about mental, and you're talking about gap, then from that person down to the leagues down, you're talking, you know, between here and the sun. That's the type of gap you're talking about on a mental application basis. Yeah. And I was just actually funny. I was just talking to one of my mates in the office, you know, young Matty Mandich, shout out to you, Matt. A young kid, love him. You know, represented WA 4 times and has taken a couple of years out of basketball. And we just flippantly threw it out there that we've got our tryouts coming up this weekend. And I said, you want to come to the Perry Lakes? He's a Coburn boy. And we were talking about a few different things, and the minutes conversation came up. And I said to him, mate, 1 grain of sand contaminates the most purest glass of water. I said, if you haven't got the purest thought to your input into the game of basketball, and unless you can disassociate yourself from minutes completely, then you're going to contaminate the space that you're in. Yeah. And then once it's contaminated, it's only a moment of time before you hate drinking it. So it's really that black and white.
I've always been fascinated by. I mean, I'm a big lover of sport, particularly the basketball, but other sports too. And then even in any league, and even at that very elite league, that 1 or 0.5% at the top, they are still very far away from the typical or the average player. And let's talk about the NBA. I mean, there's like 500 people in that league, the top 500 basketballers in the world, effectively in that league. Yet those 10 guys at the top of that league are different. And what I mean by that is they make a mistake, no matter what happens, they go back to the other end and they get the ball back. Yeah. Like they don't
spend the time. They don't spend the time like, spitting the dummy. Yeah. They spend the time going back and get the ball back because basketball's a game of possession, like most sports. So,
but how often do you see that? You know what I mean? Like they make one mistake and immediately they fly back and they can't channel that same like possessed energy the entire game. But when they do make an error, they're just capable of completely controlling the field.
But they're completely aware that their next action everyone is looking at. And as leaders, if you don't react in a way that's going to inspire your team to jump on board, then you're not doing that. It's black or white, right? Yeah. So if your next action is a momentary lapse of greatness, then you can almost shut the game down. Yeah. So they get the impact that they have. They get the leadership they have. And these are things we talked at. I was with the state under 20s, and one player out there this year was the same thing. He wasn't our captain, but if he wasn't getting the ball in a place where he could do some damage, his body language pretty much sucked the whole team along with him. Yeah, okay. It's happening at one of the NBL clubs at the Illawarra Hawks I'm looking at the moment, same thing. If you can't identify the impact you have on your team, both inside the office and on a basketball floor, then you don't know. If you don't know the impact, then you need to know the impact.
It's those qualitative items, isn't it? Because there's no stat for that.
No.
There really isn't. And that's where the coaching staff, the management...
It is a reflection thing, right? Because you can see it. When you watch a game, you can see it. But yeah, it's not an item you take a stat down for. When in the office, you reflect on your month, you can see where you started putting some dot balls in and the others around you allowed themselves some extra dots. And I'm thinking, well, hang on a sec. And I've done some study on this. So the numbers tell you at your best. So if you, Matt Hanham, are the boss of this business, the next person underneath you at their best is only operating within 70% of what you're capable of. Yet we want them to operate at our 100%. Impossible. Okay? But the average person operates at about 50% of you, not 70% of you.
No. And then it comes down to what you're bringing too.
Exactly
so
right.
then that flows.
We have that expectation. So, Kobe Bryant or you or me have the expectation that these guys are playing at their best. At their best is only your 70. That's the number. And then at their best, they're only really at 50 you on average. And I think once you understand that, then you know why Kobe has to take a game over.
Yeah.
Then you have to know sales revenue, then why Conrad has to pick the phone up. Or why you've got to do what you've got to do, because that's you at your best.
Yeah. And you've got to show that. A, do it, but then not B, show it.
Sure.
And to allow
and that's right. So
number to be 70.
By you doing it, you're creating space and gap for others to grow into.
Yeah.
But if you don't do it, then you're just creating, impedance. You're creating that wall of, well, someone needs to move and it's not going to be me. If Kobe didn't do it, or if Magic didn't do it, or those guys didn't do it, Jordan didn't do it, he wouldn't have won the championships. Would not have won them. He could have stood there, and Jordan could have stood there and not developed his game. Would have won a lot more scoring titles.
It's just in the action, right? And it's the different action because, clearly anyone on one of those benches, one of those rosters is still training X hours a day, doing X and X, but they're only just flowing along doing their X rhythm. It's then taking that step above. I caught the start of a game the other day, and they're like Westbrook's always on the floor, shooting an hour before anyone else is every single game, every single time. And it's that mindset and approach to what they do that then I guess drags those other players with them and brings the median up, right?
Well,
and the median.
100%. I mean, Kobe, there's a story about Kobe doing that with a player, and I can't remember the player who actually recalled the story recently, but Kobe was out there hours before everybody else, even hours before everyone usually goes out there. Kobe was out there, and his player thought he'd get in and get used to it, and goes talks to Kobe, and then when he left, Kobe was still out there, and he comes back out, and Kobe's still there. You check Kobe, why are you doing all this work? He goes, just to make sure you know that I've done more work than you, so when I beat you, you know why. That's intimidation plus, right?
Yeah. But he's setting an expectation.
That's right.
And that no one's going to outwork
me. Yeah. He's done the work, so he expects to benefit from that.
Yeah.
Not, I'm not going to do the work, I'll let you guys carry me.
Yeah. No, I love it. So, I touched on that book very briefly, the Phil Jackson 11 Rings. Is that a book that business people should check out as well? Is that something?
It's a great leadership book, mate. I think more so than anything else, if you value leadership in your business, I think it's a good book to read because, again, from someone who's won 11 championships, player and coach, you're not going to get much better insight into people management and situational management.
Yeah. And sport does. We both
it mirrors
agree.
life. It mirrors life.
It mirrors.
Yeah.
Okay.
100%.
So let's just change tack a little bit. Yep. So what's something that friends or family might know about you outside of work?
Might
something.
Know, might not know.
Oh well. That's up to you.
I'm not going to say anything I don't know.
This podcast is intended to be as authentic as possible, but that really is at your choice of level. What's something different? Throw basketball, throw business away.
Yep.
What's something else that is a hobby or something that you get up to or enjoy?
I love flying kites, Matt. I love flying kites. I've got 3 kites in the boot of my car at all times.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's probably the best one I've ever heard. Wow.
Some people know that. Some people know that because I have flown kites with them.
Right. Can we fly a kite together at some point?
Yeah, mate, 100%. I love flying kites.
So how did you get into flying kites?
Well, my dad and I used to fly kites, and my brother, and I guess I've lost my dad now. He's gone for about 8-9 years now. It's probably something that I've done with I had something I've done with my daughter, something I've done with my nieces and nephews, and it's something that I can try to pass on to them. I think for me it's therapy. Yeah. These days it's therapy, right? I mean, it connects me with my old man, but it also connects me with my environment. The wind and all that stuff. It centres me, allows me to just be. And invariably, why 3 kites? Because if I'm flying with someone, and some kid comes from nowhere, I don't know where these kids come from any given time of day. There's someone pops up from somewhere, mate. So I've always want to have a kite available to a kid if they want to fly one. Right.
So you've got the B and the C kite. You pull them out initially until the kid comes out. And you're like, hold this one, mate. If it tangles, it's your problem. That's really cool. No, that's really cool.
And I've done it with clients. I've done it with clients recently this year. Ones that have been around for a while said, let's go out and have a meeting, let's just fly a kite.
Do you know what I love about that is we can be so centered on the wealth and the spending money and the thing, something as simple as a kite. And I must say, I saw one, we were away up just in a coastal town recently up in Shark Bay, and I saw one in the shop, and I nearly grabbed. My kids are probably almost there and probably could do now, but I saw one. I thought, what, I'll get one. I won't buy that, but I will get one because I do remember that from a child as well. Man. And you're right, there's a nature component, but it's also you're talking about a 5. I mean, yours might be a bit more expensive.
No, mate, they're cheap. I've got one good one, which is one I bought for my daughter. Yeah. I can't fly properly. I don't think even she could, but. It's one of the dual string ones, but mine are cheap, man.
Yeah. So funny faces on them. We can be so obsessed with having a really expensive this or that for a bit of a thrill, but it's amazing how much fun you could have with a couple of bits of string, right?
And I remember making them when I was younger, right? And Dad's ones used to be these are the old Burmese fighting kites, I used to call them. They used to try and fight other kites out of the sky and stuff. Yep. So I actually remember we did have a kind of kite fight. Over a couple of streets when I was younger, and then this kite got tangled up over these houses. It was crazy. Yeah, it's a bit of fun, mate. Like I said, it gets you out. It connects you with everything that's good, and it's just something that I think your kids will get a hell of a lot of fun out of and some great memories from.
Yeah, I love it. So, some of your basketball fraternity and others have dobbed you in, and I suggest that you have a bit of a badge of honour.
Hey?
And you wear a bit of a badge of honour around your sleeping habits. What's that all about?
I don't know who claims I have a badge of honour. Life is what life is, right? I'm probably sleeping longer than I have in many years these days, and I think I'm still only averaging 5 hours sleep a night. But and like I've said with everybody about everything, it's not about the length of anything. It's not about the length of time you spend on anything. It's about the quality of time you spend everywhere, right? Right. So
I wasn't sure where you were going with that, but anyway.
Well, you can take that wherever you want. I'm just staying with sleep. But so I track a lot of things in my life. Okay, so sleep is one of those things I track. It's not a bragging issue. It's just what it is. So
I know. I'm just teasing. So sleeping the most you ever have, and nearly 5 hours now. So I mean So on average, before you might be getting sort of 4 hours sleep.
3 to 4, yeah.
What does that look like? Like, what time of day is that? How does...
Usually between 2 and 3. 2 and 3 I'll get to bed, and I'm waking up between 5 and 6. That's what I was doing when I was doing those hours.
Right.
Now I'm up by 5, so I'm generally in bed around 12.
Right. So what are you doing? What are you doing between 11 and 2 a.m? Are you doing the Ask Gary V hustle, or is it just...
I don't know. I've really become a real research boffin these days.
Yeah.
Watching TED Talks, and I mean, I could watch something, and then I'm just researching for hours. And one thing will lead to another thing. Now, God bless those people.
If I have to watch something,
put those links in those articles, right? Because then you click that, and you're down this bloody Alice in Wonderland trap again.
Yeah.
And then I'm clipping this, and I'm recording that, and I'm quoting this. And it is just that. It's just research and watching and reading. I mean, and a lot of it just loops back the same way. And it's quite interesting because, I post regularly, and the content I post is coming from what I read and how I feel and the research I do. But you and I both know, mate, there's so much text out there. And to actually validate the stuff you're reading so that you've got some level of reasonable basis as to what you post is probably why I try to validate things a bit more to factual data.
So, I mean, look, I'm very much the same. Like, I'll want to learn about something, and I'll just throw that time, whatever time I can at it. The perfect example was, I think it was Monday night. and I made a mistake of turning a movie on at about 9:30, knowing where that was going to send me for the next several hours. We're podcasting right now, so one of the big things that I've been starting to put a lot of effort and focus on is audio.
Yep.
And audio is going into crazy new places, I believe, and it's being talked about a lot. But what I'm interested in is film scoring and noise, and just different aspects of where this can go to a whole new level. And so I watched this movie on film scoring, and it's got your Hans Zimmers and all these different things in there. And funnily enough, a movie popped up for me to start the ball rolling, which is unfortunate because I knew where it was going. I ended up into crazy, all sorts of... I probably leave that night, whenever I decided to switch that off at about 1 o'clock, with about 40 links of things that I want to keep reading and having to go there. I guess, just to lead into a similar story, but my question is, you're sleeping 4 hours, 3 to 4 hours a night. I mean, I knew I'd made that mistake. Yep. I knew I should have been asleep earlier, and I knew the next morning that it goes into my next day and affects it. And I'm probably a 6.5 hour sleeper for the last decade, but have needed that and feel like if I go under that, it really gets to me over a couple of days. How are you surviving? What else are you doing in your day to give you the energy to just keep going forward and forward and forward on the three? I get the quality.
Years, mate. I guess I've given myself time. I mean, two things, right? I don't complain about being tired about lack of sleep. That's the first thing. I mean, once I realised, and I could be in bed and I could be trying to get 7 hours, and I'm just going to get 5, right? So I'll get up and I'll do stuff.
Yeah.
So I've given up giving lack of sleep any power. That's the first piece, right? I mean, because there's no point in not getting the sleep and complaining about not getting sleep. That's just double whamming yourself.
Yeah.
The second piece of that is I allow myself to catch up where I need to. So if I feel like shutting down over a day or 2 days or whatever the case might be, I'll do that. Yeah. If I want an afternoon nap, I'll do that. So they're the things I give myself the ability to do to warrant what that is.
Yeah.
Now, length of sleep, again, I'm not sure. The studies aren't correlated. I mean, Kobe Bryant is what they call a polyphasic sleeper, which means he gets 5 sleeps a day, no longer than 2 hours in one sleep.
I think it's your Edisons and that of the world were similar, right? They'd be in these zones of inventing, and they do it through the night and things as well.
And so I guess not everyone fits what they would call a stereotypical sleep pattern. Yeah. So identify what works for you and allows you to perform at your best, and go with it. Yeah. And those people that think it's a badge of honour, it is what it is.
I think, just to put that into perspective, I'm guessing the naps and that, I mean, whilst they might not be daily, they're probably quite important, because I know everyone has a different requirement, etc. But it would appear, based on what we know, that sort of 3 to 4 hours isn't enough. I know you've also had some other sleep issues as well, which clearly would have diminished quality. So there's no way that you could have really been in a good space for a lot of that time. It's obviously improving and getting better, but you would think that without a mid-afternoon nap, which I think there's a lot of positives around that time.
Well, mate, it's happened to Europe, man. I mean, far out, I want to move there because that's not frowned upon over there.
No, but the thing is, when I do that, if I do it right, you come out fresher with the ability to do more and better work.
And it's just quality, right?
And that sort of polyphasic type activity is obviously, you need to be in an extreme environment where you're willing to be disciplined to start to create that process in your life. But if you're doing that, if you want to achieve more work, that's the way.
That is the way.
That is the way, because also I know that if I can get in the right headspace and feeling and etc., I can get a lot of work done between 10 p.m. and say 2 a.m. because no one's going to bother me. Yeah. And I think that's what the way a lot of these people approach it as well. But that requires incredible discipline, which you've obviously got as well.
Discipline's one thing, but having yourself set up to do it is another. Okay, so people around you that understand that. Your environment around you that allows you to do that. So you can create discipline these days by just using your calendar better.
Yeah. So what does a typical week look like for you then?
You're usually up 5 most days. Yeah. 5:30 at a stretch if I really want to be lazy. But then I'm meditating, I'm journaling, in the gym these days at about 7. I mean, I don't mind getting there early. It's just I try and avoid the crowds. Yeah. And then into the office straight away after that. So I'm in the office about 8.
So you gym every day?
3 days a week.
Yeah.
These days, 3 days a week. Might be 4 days if I'm feeling like I need to.
Yeah.
But if I'm not in the gym, then I'm just spending more time at home I don't speak to anyone before 7 o'clock in the morning. I try not to.
Yeah.
It's one of my biggest things, and I'm lucky. I mean, I say I'm lucky because I don't live with anyone, and allows me to practice my centeredness stuff. So.
Yeah.
You know, not having to speak to anyone doesn't take you out of your comfort zone too early. You'd know, you've got kids and stuff, right? So
I get it. I wish.
Yeah, exactly.
I wish I could structure my start of the day that way.
Yeah,
Typically, that's not how it happens.
And it's not. So I'm pretty lucky these days. That's how I am.
Yeah.
So I'm in the office. Usually, if I'm doing most of my meetings and I don't want people to come out of the way, I'll do them all the way into the office, and then I'll sit in the office and then leave the office generally around 4 or 5 o'clock. I'm not in there too late these days. On basketball training days, I'm at basketball training. Other days, I'm catching up with my family, friends, and I'll do that socialising, and then I'll come back home, do some reading, do some watching, catch up on all that stuff before I'm in bed by about 12 o'clock.
Yeah. Okay. So a couple of questions, I guess. So what training do you do, when you're training that 3 to 4 times a week? And also, what are those other routines, like you journaling, etc.?
Yep.
So I guess tying back into that, that being able to cope on less sleep, what
Yep.
are those practices that you run on a regular basis in the week?
Well, so I've been training now for the best part of 12 months with a mate of mine who's taken a very different approach to training with me. I've got a pretty worn and torn body based on my injuries and levels of sport I've played at. So I haven't trained for about 15 years up until last year, and he's managed to get me back in the gym, and get me focusing on different things, which has allowed me then more quality in other areas of my life, and I'm not feeling any soreness or pain at the moment, so that's really good. Backs and that
So
good.
what is this? What type of training are you
That's
doing?
mainly strength training.
Okay.
I do that with the guys in East Perth, Dale and the crew out there.
The body consultants.
And again, it's speaking to Dale, he knows what I'm trying to achieve, and he doesn't bother me too much, but he's very mindful of how I train so that I'm not injuring myself.
Yeah.
That's because he knows that if I injure myself, then I'm going to be a big bloody girl, and it's going to take him twice to get me back. So it's mainly strength training there. I work with a naturopath to get my diet right and to get. I've been dealing with a psoriasis skin issue for about 10 years.
Okay.
So I got introduced to this naturopath, and he's got me to a point where I'm comfortable with it for the first time in 10 years. Not dealing with any bullshit, bloody antibiotics or anything. Just eating better, and working with supplements. So supplements.
Can we dig into this a little bit? So what does your diet look like, and what sort of?
It's a lot better these days, mate. Jeez,
Yeah.
a lot better these days. I mean, again, working with Dale in the naturopath, it's more a high protein, high fats diet.
Yep.
Try and keep the carbs and sugars out where possible. You're talking to a bloke that used to eat curry and rice 5-6 nights a week, mate. So, and I still love that stuff, right?
It's not natural, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you grew up doing. I mean,
But when you're living the life that I was living, which is highly stressful and
Yep.
which triggers your cortisol levels, and therefore cortisol, inhibits muscle growth, and understanding all this piece,
Yep.
which is what I never really had any idea of before. All that stuff, how to manage that so this works, or how to manage that so this works. So between Dale and my naturopath Sean, we track. The stuff we track is crazy. Extracellular water, intracellular water, muscle capacity, bone density. We track that on a weekly basis.
Okay.
So I'm knowing how my week's been. I know where my results should be, and I'm very mindful of what I do and how it affects my body.
And you think that going through that process in the last 12 months has raised that energy level? And
yeah, it's allowed me to be very, very dialed in and not stupidly expectant of myself when I know I can't be.
So you mean dialed in? You mean focused?
Yeah.
Right.
So when you know you're going to be facing a frigging weigh-in every week, the
changes a few things.
The amount of times you look at a beer and you think, well, I don't really want that. Is real. I'm telling you, it's real. I never thought it would be.
No, well, it is real. I mean, I know, and having gone in and out of phases like that as well, it's very real. And having that structure there is actually really does empower you to just push back a lot of extra things that you may just consume just because. So then that's really that your sleep's improved.
Your
diet's improved. You're taking some
supplements,
the right supplements, and you're obviously able to focus for longer and better.
Yeah, because managing stress to me, because I've worked at high stress levels, like probably yourself, and you probably become disrespectful to yourself by the way you do it, because it's just normal.
So true. It's just
it's
everyone's
just
doing it. They'll disrespect their body and their mental state. The first thing before anything else.
Yeah, and you sit there, and I'd come to terms with who I was, and I was okay with that. But I guess the big piece was, I'm okay with that until someone challenged me. And then no one really challenged me. And I mean, when anyone did challenge me, I would manage to make them sit down again. But Dale came at it very interestingly. And because he asked me to help him, I got involved. I said, just don't hurt me. And when I helped him, he said, look, can you help me build a business? Can you help me widen my networks? He'd just come in from Adelaide. Okay. And I guess he came at it from a point where I really wanted to help the guy. And if turning me from what I was to what I could be would help him do that, then yeah, no worries, go for it.
It's a win. Okay. So we've talked about Phil Jackson a couple of times, and I guess perhaps he's a mentor of sorts. Do you have any other mentors?
I guess I've been fairly lucky, mate. I mean, I don't really have any specific mentors, although I do have some really, really open and robust conversations with a lot of people. We're privileged enough to have that brekkie group that we're part of, and I value the opinions of those guys any day of the week.
Yep.
So I don't have a mentor per se. I have an advisory board that sits with my business, which and the external seat on that business is my accountant, which I value his opinion. I've got a couple of key people around me, a couple of lawyers that I value their opinions of from a business perspective.
Yep.
Life, I talk to a lot of people about life stuff. They could range from old basketball coaches, which I've coached with and I've played for, and I still catch up with those guys regularly.
Yep.
And we don't just talk basketball; we talk life stuff, just to mates. I'm a very open person these days. I used to be really closed. Take me back a few years, but I realised the more honest a conversation you have, the better the conversation and quality of the conversation is.
So what changed that?
Lots of things, but the biggest thing probably losing my dad. That probably forced me to whilst I'd lost a lot of people along the way, I lost my grandparents and lost a few friends, losing my dad probably hit home more about the time you spend on this planet and the interactions you have with people. And I think all of that threads into what I would like to call legacy. I don't think legacy is the amount of money you leave behind. I don't think legacy is the things you leave behind. I think legacy is the lives you touch, and the way you impact those people, and those people impact you. So, to allow that to really happen, you have to have great conversations.
I think it's a really strange space, isn't it? Like, going to a funeral is something that I find enjoyable is not the right word, but it's just such a reminder and a shock to the system every time, and the more so the closer the individual is to you, of how short it all is, and those things or those structures or whatever you're putting in your mind to stop you from doing what you should be or what you feel you should be doing is just incredible. And that's just one of the biggest jolts I think that we have in our lives is attending the funeral of someone we know a little bit or a lot, and sometimes it can be a little bit, and then just watching the flood of people that turn up. Because they've touched people, it's not whether they're rich or poor. It's not. No. It's
not a thing.
It's just what they've done in their life, how they've approached, how they've connected with other people, and I've seen different sides of people that I didn't know existed by attending a funeral, and I think it's one of the most powerful shocks that we can have, because I just feel we do turn to autopilot so quickly, so easily, all of us, and it's like a fight against that.
For sure. Yeah, we are just in autopilot a lot of the time, probably 80% of the time. Yeah. When I start working with people, because I run a financial service business, I do some consulting, I do some one-on-one performance management with people too. Yeah. One of the biggest things I do, and one of the things I love doing with them, is getting them to write their own eulogy. You talk about taking them right out of their comfort zone, mate. You see the tears well straight away. And I'm working on mentoring a couple of people at the moment, and that's how we start. And that's something that's really, really powerful. And the reason why
it's ironically almost goal setting, isn't it? In a sense.
Well, it is. It is. Yeah. But writing your own eulogy through the mouths of the people that you want speaking at your funeral is emphatically powerful.
It's not here. It's what's been presented to the world, right? And how people will perceive it. Yeah, that's really interesting.
And it gets really behind your conscious mind.
Okay, so anyone listening, write your
own eulogy through the eyes of the person or the people that you want speaking at your funeral. And I wrote something similar many, many years ago, and it was down at Redgate Beach in Margaret River, and I remember myself writing pages of stuff and crying for 3 hours straight. It was, but that moment was extremely liberating.
I could see how that would be very powerful.
The emotional cleanse was phenomenal.
Yeah, right. Wow. definitely something I'm gonna. I don't know. I'll have to block a couple of hours away and go and write this up. But no, I can see how that would be very liberating.
Yeah, especially if you've got children or you've got loved ones.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, I'm going to try that for sure. So, do you consume a lot of podcasts?
Yep.
What's
probably not as much as you guys do. I mean, I do a lot of audio books and stuff, but yeah, podcasts I've gotten onto because of you guys. I mean, I'd say you guys, the Brekkie group that we're with, because they are all over this stuff.
Yep. So all podcasts, audio book. What's something you've listened to lately that's sort of got your attention, or you found as a bit? I think, like you were just saying, like we get into them. Yep. So I think you then find that a lot of them can be very common. Yep. So what's something lately that's popped to mind that you just thought was a bit different?
Well, I mean,
or something
podcasting was I try and consume as much Gary Vee as I can.
Okay.
I know you can be over the top a lot of times, and I think you need a break from him every now and then.
Yep.
And I like the Tim Ferriss stuff, but again, it's a large chunk of time to listen to that stuff. An audio book that I've just finished, which is just front of mind with me at the moment because it's getting me back to my quality of meditation, is called The Code of an Extraordinary Mind by Vishen Lakhiani from Mind Valley. Now, there's a chapter in that book that talks about hacking meditation, and that's what I'm playing with at the moment, as to how to get a better quality meditation, as to what he was, how he was taught by a 40-year-old Zen monk, a 40-year Zen monk. So meditating like one of those guys would be phenomenal if I could crack that code without spending 40 years chasing that.
So we'll link that up in the
it's
in
great.
The show notes, and also the Phil Jackson book as well.
It's a great book, and again that book is actually quite good because it also comes with a workbook too, because there's a lot of work throughs in that. But yeah, if anybody values meditation, particularly the end of that book is very worthwhile listening to.
All right. So let's say that you're a bit of a naughty boy, doing something you shouldn't have been, and you got thrown in the jail in the middle of nowhere for 12 months, and you needed to take a couple of books with you, or you had the ability to smuggle in a couple of books with you. Not sure where this story came from, but it works for a good metaphor. What would you take, and what would be some of those greatest books of all time that you think would what would you take with you to sort of see you through something
if I've
like
got
that?
that much time, I'm spending a bit of time dabbling and reading the old sacred texts at the moment. Yep. And what I'm finding is that needs time. Because of the way it's written, the grammar and the structure, you do need to spend some time reading. I really like reading old books because if I can get as close to the origin of however it's being interpreted at the moment, then I can establish my own interpretation. Yep. So I've read a lot of books, Think and Grow Rich is the Rich Dad Poor Dads, the Alchemists and all those things. I've read all those things and they're all great books. But what I've realised when I've started delving back and back is that they all originate. Version. Yeah, it's a new version, and it's the interpretation of that. And I was fortunate enough to listen to catch up with one of my favourite authors when I was in LA, William Whitecloud, and the same thing we just talked about, the origin of the word or the origin of the practice. Yeah. So if I've got time and no other distraction, I'd probably just take as many sacred texts as I could take with me. And I mean, I've got them on my iPad at the moment, so whenever I get a chance to read, I'll read them. But you've got to be in the right headspace because they are written so differently.
Yeah, cool. So what's one of those? What would you take?
Well, I mean, I'd say the Bible's probably the easiest one to read out of all of them, without being without any religious connotation. It's just a great story, or a book of great stories. Yep. That's probably the easiest of them all to read.
Yeah. Okay. So to flip from very old to very new, what's the one piece of tech you couldn't live without?
Strangely enough, my phone, and I hate the stupid thing. Mind you, I do disconnect from it from time to time. I'll shut it out every now and then. Yep. A day. I mean, I'm not. People say to me, Conrad, why don't you just go? You've got a tech addiction or something. I mean, it facilitates my life. I mean, if I can come here and do this, or go home from here and do something, prepare for something else, it allows me to do that. I can't hate it. That's just stupid. So I know I don't have a tech addiction. I have a living my life to the fullest addiction. And I'll do.
That's a valid point. I hear a lot of it these days. We get told, we put our phones down for the second we get home, and we don't watch TV, and we don't do this, and we don't do that. And I'm like, that's fine, but I'm still doing many things, as I know you are, constantly. Yeah. So it's not about that. And as the technology changes again, we'll have another even easier use, which we won't need to be having a screen in our face. We'll be able to achieve things in an AR. Yeah. Primarily in an AR world, and where we can see in front of us, and I'll have these couple of questions that I have on a piece of paper, probably just sitting right
there, yeah.
here. I won't need to do that a few times and pop my head down. So
I mean,
I think that's just, you know what I mean? I think that's a typical like old man view of like, that I don't like change. I think change, like the innovation will just roll through, and before we know it, we'll have a new problem. I think I've thrown to you before the great horse manure issue of 1910 or whatever it was, where we were riding horses around, and that was a huge problem because New York and London and all that was just wall to wall horse shit. Until then there comes the car, and the problem, the population of horses has dipped dramatically. Speaking of horses, I think you own a horse.
I've got 2, I think, at the moment. It might be 3. I think I've got 2. Oh no, I've got 2. It might be 3.
What is that? Is that kind of like when you don't know the children that you might have fathered? Or?
No, or whether the syndicate that I'm in is acquiring another one at the moment. So
awesome.
Yeah, no, they're fun. I love horses, but I can imagine what they would have been like when they were everywhere. They weren't looking like what they are when they were right thoroughbreds, mate.
No, not at all, not at all. All right, well, look, I'm going to wrap it up pretty shortly, but I guess as I usually finish things off is just what's the one thing that you would say to my audience that they could do to sort of amplify their business? And I use the term amplified business, but I really do collectively think that life comes into that as well.
Yeah,
so
100%.
We've chatted away from business a bit
in
this, but to me, I mean, it's all life, right? Because it's a lot of it's performance management and understanding concepts and values, and I really think that's sometimes we neglect that and we just talk literally dollars and cents. But what's the one thing that you would say that people could do to amplify and grow their business?
Be aware of yourself and then the value of your brand.
Yep.
I think where we are at the moment, where we're moving into, is exemplifying that. No matter whether you'll be working for somebody else or yourself, just understand who you are, what value you bring, and be prepared to amplify that. Okay, awesome. All right, well, look, thanks very much for coming on. I mean, where can people find out a bit more about you if they want to get in touch? Social media, mate. Facebook, Conrad Francis, or Instagram, Conrad Francis, probably the 2 best ones. If you want to have a Twitter battle with me, have a crack. Yep. I'm on there every now and then. But yeah, those 3. And inspiredmoney.com.au? Yep, website inspiredmoney.com.au. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions around finances. Awesome. Or anything else, I'm sure. I'm sure you'd be happy to chat. Cup of coffee is an easy fee. All right. Well, thanks very much for for coming into the show, Conrad. I really appreciated the chat and the time. And I'm sure we should do this again sometime. Thanks a lot, mate. Thank you. Hey guys, Matt Hanham here, and I hope you really enjoyed that Amplify Your Business podcast. I thought the episode was really exciting, and I'd love to hear your comments as well. We also have plenty of other episodes, so check us out on the iTunes store.